For me personally, this is probably the most real I've ever been as far as admitting things that I struggle with. And I'm able to connect a little bit more with the message when it's something that I'm dealing with. So most of the time, when I get up here and talk, and most preachers when they get up and talk, if it's something, really good and from the heart, it's something that they deal with, something that they struggle with. So don't ever think that the stuff that we say up here is not something that we're dealing with. Because for me, this is like smack dab hit me right in the middle of the face this week as I was getting ready for this. But today, Pastor Tracy, my father, he's not here today. He skipped out on y'all today to go be with his mother, my grandmother, on her birthday. And if she's watching, happy birthday, Mama. We love you. But today, I'll let you in on a little family dynamic we got, okay? Telling family stuff, you can get in a lot of trouble. But me and my wife got back from a vacation a couple weeks ago, and whenever I went out to eat with my dad and mom or something like that, and my dad says this to me. He goes, "Hey, I want you to preach the last Sunday of September." What's this month? August. Okay? Keep that in mind. So this past Tuesday night, we had like a big family dinner, and we had the McElwains over because Mark is getting deployed and he's going to be gone for 6 months. So we had everybody over, and we're getting ready to eat, and we pray. We leave our food on the kitchen stove so it's nice and hot. That's the best way to do it. Plus, you don't want people coughing on the food on the table. That's just weird. That's nasty. But anyway, we're going through the line, and Dad looks at me, and I'm the media guy at church. I made that video. I make a lot of the videos and graphics and stuff like that. So that's what I do on a weekly basis. He says, "Hey, you ready for Sunday?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like normal. I'm doing all the stuff I normally do. "You ready for Sunday?" "Yeah, I'm good. I'm ready to go." This is Tuesday, and I think he's probably thinking to himself, "You're already done with your message? You're ready to go?" I'm like, "I'm good." He goes, "So what you preaching on?" I said, "Whoa, what? Hold on. Back that up a little bit. What you mean, what am I preaching on?" I said, "I'm preaching the last Sunday of September. That's what you said." "Oh, I'm in August." I was like, "Cool. Nice little detail to throw in there at the last minute. That's a good thing to know." Just casually, "Oh, I'm in August," So here we are. It's a good thing we had that family dinner. Otherwise, I'd have got a call last night. "Hey, I hadn't heard anything about you preaching Sunday. You still preaching tomorrow, right?" That would have been bad. That would have made for a bad night. I wouldn't got any sleep. But today we're going to talk about something that has been a struggle for me, and I'm willing to bet, I got a lot of reaction in the first service, that it's something that everybody in the room has struggled with. And I think we can all agree that at different stages of our lives, there are things that we can take from season to season in our life that are good things, right? Like good lessons we've learned, life lessons. Maybe you got some good advice. Manners, it's a good thing to carry through with you. But we can also agree that there's a lot of bad things that we need to, grow up, mature, put some of these things aside in our lives. And for me, this is what we're going to focus on today. One of those things that we have to work through and get past is our excuses. Our excuses. And excuses are like fake walls. And I have a beautiful fake wall right here. We don't have much of a budget for stuff like this. This is as good as a wall as I could get. But we have a fake wall right here, and our excuses are pretty much just like fake walls, right? So we all make excuses. How many of you would be willing to I'm not going to ask you any more questions the rest of the time. If you've ever made an excuse, slip your hand up. All right, see, that's all the crowd interaction I need for the rest of the service. You're cool. Don't worry about it. But excuses are so much like fake walls. Like, honestly, if this was bigger and you could get further away, from a distance, it may look like a real brick wall. You're like, "Oh, they put a brick wall on stage." But as you get closer to it, obviously, paper thin, just like our excuses most of the time, right? And for me personally, a couple weeks ago, I started kind of waking up to the idea that I make a lot of excuses. We're going to talk about it a little bit, and I'm willing to bet that you do the same thing. But our excuses generally, you make excuses, and we try to make them look like real reasons why we're not going to do something or we are going to do something, right? We wrap up our excuses and reasons, and we dress them up, make them look real pretty so people they can't see through that we're just making an excuse. And before you know it, you're reasons have turned into becauses. That's our terminology we use. We'll say, well, I would come to that small group, but I can't because. That's just a random one, isn't it? That's not pertinent at all to all the stuff we've been talking about lately. I would take that job promotion, but I can't because. I would do this, but I can't because. And most of the time, it's because we're just lazy or we don't want to do the work. But we're not going to say that, right? There's a very fine line between an excuse and a reason. There's a very fine line. And for a lot of us, it's really difficult to see that sometimes. Wouldn't it be nice, and I've done this, okay? I don't recommend doing this to everybody. I think I can get away with it sometimes, but have you ever seen somebody you could see right through their excuse? They're standing in front of you and they're making the worst excuse ever why they're not going to do something. And you're just like thinking in your head, man, what a loser. You're just sitting here making excuses, right? You're making excuses. And I've actually said it before, and I didn't call him a loser. I mean, I've done that to Marissa a few times, my sister, but I can get away with that. But I've looked at people before and I'm like, you're just making an excuse. How's that excuse taste? It's real good, right? You're making excuses. Quit making excuses. And you're dressing up an excuse as an attempt to pass it off as a reason. That's what we do. And the funny thing about it is this. It's really easy to see when other people are making excuses, but it's kind of difficult to see when we're doing it, right? It can be really difficult to look ourselves in the mirror and say, I'm just making excuses. And we say, our terminology is, we say, the reason is I'm doing this. The reason I'm not doing this is. We never say, my excuse is. Well, my excuse is. Wouldn't that, honestly, let's be honest, wouldn't that be kind of refreshing? If somebody just said that? Like that person, right now, everybody in the room has thought of somebody that you're like, I wish they could hear this message. You know what? I may casually slip them a link to this after today and be like, hey, this one's for you. But it's so easy to see that in other people, but it's so difficult to see it in ourselves. Let's say you have a teenager in your house. It's real easy to see their excuses, right? Real easy. Real easy. Wouldn't it? I mean, I ain't got kids, but from the, parents, you can chime in on this. Let's say you get your child's report card, your teenager's report card, and they got a few C's on there, and you notice the teacher says, well, there's a lot of missing assignments. Those zeros, man, they'll bring that average down real quick. I don't know if most of these kids ain't learned anything about math because throw 1 0 in there, it don't matter what you did on everything else. It brings it down substantially. But wouldn't it be refreshing if you as a parent, you went to your child and you were like, hey, what's this about? Why you got a C in this class? I see there's some zeros right here. I mean, they'd probably still get in trouble, but if they just looked at you and be like, Dad, my excuse is I didn't want to do it. I decided I wanted to stay up late, play video games, online with my friends, did that, and, I just didn't study. But we don't do that kind of thing, right? If you've got a teenager and they've ever got a bad grade, and have you heard some of the reasons they use? Well, the teacher don't like me. That's the most common one. I mean, the teacher she does not like me. I've said that one before, okay? Teacher don't like me. We don't get along. She don't communicate well with us. She told us that one test was going to be then, and then she made a pop quiz, and then she checked. No, she didn't. You didn't listen. You didn't do your work. I've been there. That's been me. I have done that. It would be so refreshing if we would just start saying, my excuse is. For a lot of us, your excuses originally, they stem from something real. Like it could have been something that somebody told you, somebody called you, they called you something, they labeled you something, right? And maybe it's something like your excuse came out of something was expected of you that you didn't live up to. That can be where an excuse comes from. Or a lot of times we make excuses for our behaviors. We make excuses for our behaviors. I'm not the only one, right? Somebody, you make excuses for how you react to certain things, or make excuses for your overreactions to certain things. Anybody ever get mad and overreact a little bit? Only a few people? Cool, we got an honest crowd here today. Only a few of you overreact. People will say, you get in an argument with somebody, you're always overreacting. Why are you always overreacting to everything? Well, it's because the reason is you don't respect me. You don't respect me as a man in this house. That's why. No, the reason is you're just an angry person. You got a lot of pent-up anger and frustration, and you take it out on people. That's the real reason. Maybe this is one of my issues. Maybe you give excuses for why you procrastinate. We got any procrastinators in the room? I waited to the last second to raise my hand. I am the king procrastinator, okay? And man, I've gotten better as I've gotten older. When I was in college, it was at like peak level. It was bad. I can remember many times, like when you get to college, usually you're going to take some classes, you got to write long papers. I had a 25-page paper that was due for a class. I was going to Campbell University, and it was single-spaced. It wasn't double, okay? So that's really 50. But I basically had a 50-page double-spaced paper due, and what did I do? I waited till the night before. Had to have like 15 references and stuff. You know the worst part about it? I got an A on that, and it just made me go, I'm good under pressure. It's how I got to work. Like, papers, I'm good at writing papers, but man, I do my best work in the last minute in clutch. I'm clutch. I'm like MJ over here. Give me the ball the last minute on these papers, and I'm going to knock it out of the park, But that's what I always told myself. And I was like, there'd be so many times that I'd know about a paper, and I would have time to work on it. And I would sit there at my computer. Anybody ever sat at your computer for a class and just looked at a blank screen and be like, I'll do this later? I'd sit there and I'm like, you know what? This ain't going to be my best work if I do this right now. Ain't no way. It ain't going to be good. So I'm going to wait till the last minute and I'm going to knock out that A and not sleep for 3 days. But that's one of my big issues was procrastinating. Maybe neglecting is an issue you have, avoiding. Maybe you avoid certain types of people. You have an excuse for avoiding certain types of people. For me, when I was in high school, early part of high school, I had reasons why I didn't like the popular crowd at school. Now let's rewind and I'll tell you why. So we moved to Fayetteville, North Carolina, the year 2000. So I was literally going into the 9th grade. Whenever we lived in St. Mary's, it was like, does anybody have those seasons of your life where you like look back on it and everything seemed to go right? Like it was just wonderful? St. Mary's, Georgia, where we live, for me was like that. Like I don't have hardly any bad memories of that time in my life. And I went through elementary school to middle school there, and it was great. I had so many friends. Like I was an athlete. Me and all my buddies, we played everything together. And, I was part of the popular crowd there, right? We just had a good time. And that was, at that point in time in history, most people didn't have cell phones, okay? That wasn't a common thing, believe it or not. Most people didn't have cell phones. And so 8th grade year, now, right as the year is ending, they were opening up in Camden County, Georgia, which states like Georgia, Florida, Texas, they have a lot of really extravagant, nice high schools, okay? Like the lottery has really helped them with their school system there, unlike ours. But anyway, but their school there, it was one in the county, so that helps, so they put a lot more money into it. But they were opening up a 9th grade center that they attached to the high school, and we were going to be the first ones to use it. Right? So we was all excited. Like it's the last day of school. We're all hugging, high-fiving, like, yeah, man, I'll see you in the fall. It's going to be awesome starting high school together. Nope. Not for me. Not for me. And I only knew like two numbers of some of my friends because I'd call them and ask them if they want to come play basketball or something like that. We'd hang out outside all day. And so I told 2 people. Whenever I found out, my parents sat us down and like, hey, life's going really good right now. I want to wreck it for you. We're moving to North Carolina. That's kind of how it felt like they were talking to me. And I was like, man, I don't want to move. And I got angry about it, like super angry. I started thinking about all the stuff I was going to be missing. I remember our last Sunday at St. Mary's, my dad was a pastor there. Last Sunday, we left the church, went and ate at Burger King because we were big balling. We went and ate at Burger King. And then we drove straight into Fayetteville that night, right? Got to Fayetteville about 8 o'clock at night. And I had to start high school the next morning. Southview High School, didn't know a soul. I was ticked. Didn't want to be there. And man, my freshman year of high school was terrible. And I started developing this thing where if I found out somebody was part of the popular crowd, I hated their guts. You know why? Because that was me in Georgia. Like, that was me. That's supposed to be me. That's supposed to be me. I'm supposed to have all the friends. That's supposed to be me. And then, the worst part, and most people, even if you have friends, the worst part of like starting high school or something like that is when you go to lunch and you're trying to figure out where to sit. Like, I get there and I'm mad, but, it made me feel a little better because I'm fixing to eat. But, like, I go through the pizza line because I'm like, pizza's like universally good at like all schools. They have cafeteria pizza. I love it. If anybody has a connection to get some cafeteria pizza, I would kill a whole tray. Like, if we got any lunch ladies in the crowd, hit me up after service. I've thought about that for years. I'm like, man, I'd kill for some school pizza. Well, that'd be fantastic. But I get through the line, and even standing in the line, I'm sitting there thinking I should be with my friends in Georgia. I bet they're having a good time. They're probably in line right now, hanging out in the lunch line, having a good time. And I'm like, I'm not there. I'm ticked. So I go through the line, I pay for my food, and I'm standing there looking at this like sea of a cafeteria, and I'm trying to figure out where to sit. That was like a terrible feeling. So then, I'm going to let you in on another thing. So the cafeteria tables were about as long as these rows right here. And I'm looking around. And at that time, like, I don't think I had spoken to anybody that entire day except maybe the teacher that called my name out wrong because they can't pronounce Micah. I got Mika, Michelle. There's no L's in it. Like, you got a degree? Come on. I'm like, seriously. But I think the only people, honestly, I had talked to that whole day was some of the teachers. And I'm standing there trying to figure out where to sit. And I look over, and there's a table of all black girls. I'm going to let you in on a secret. Black women love me. Always have. I guess they like thick white guys. There you go. Howard, you need to control your woman. Control your woman. But I knew that. I knew that in my mind. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go sit with the black girls, and that's where I'm going to go. So I went and sat with them, and it was awesome. Like, they accepted me, and that's where I sat the whole first semester of freshman year. It was all black girls and my really white self sitting at the end talking to them. But they were super nice, I mean, I appreciated it. But that was my freshman year. I was angry, and I didn't like the popular crowd. And, blaming something, an excuse is basically blaming something internal on something external. So I was angry. And I was taking it out on, like, the popular people. Like, I'd be mean to them and everything too, like be a jerk, stuff like that. And the whole problem is I didn't really have a problem with them, I had a problem with me. I was blaming how I felt on them. It wasn't their fault. Anybody ever done something like that? Of course not. You haven't done that, have you? So a few weeks ago, me and my wife, we went on a really fun trip that we had planned for years. And we went into Ireland in 2019. We had planned a trip to England and Scotland in 2020. Well, y'all know how 2020 went. We don't got kids, so we can afford to go on some trips sometimes. But 2020 happened, and all of our plans got canceled. And to be perfectly honest, and this year for us has been terrible, okay? Like, our house burnt down. I don't want to get into all that, but just a bad year. So the beginning of the summer, we had like flight credits and all this kind of stuff just kind of sitting there, and me and my wife start talking about it, and we're like, you know what? Let's go on this trip. This year has been terrible. Let's try to make this year a little bit better. So we decided to go, and we did, and it was fantastic. It was a lot of fun. We had a whole lot of fun. Now, my wife, who's in here right now, so I got to be real careful. Whenever she plans a trip, she doesn't do like the super relaxing things. Like, we're going to make this an adventure, okay? Lots of physical stuff, like going all over the place. We're going to just plan and just do lots of stuff. So we were all over England, Scotland, and stuff like that. And it seemed like we were on the move all the time. It was awesome. I'm glad now, looking back on it, we did it that way. But I discovered partway through that trip that I was making a lot of excuses. And the excuses I was making was because of my left knee. So my left knee, like, it legitimately is all kinds of jacked up, okay? I've had 2 reconstructive surgeries on it, like major stuff, like 6-8 months of rehab type thing. Ligament damage, repair, bone repair, everything you can think of that could be wrong with the knee, I had it. I literally had my last surgery. Before I had the last surgery, my doctor told me, he said, if you were 10 years older, I'd just replace your knee, the whole thing. He's like, but you can only get 2 in your lifetime, and you're kind of young to be getting a knee replacement. I was like, sweet. So I know what's coming for me in the future. I'm going to have to get my knee replaced. But I've noticed from that, in the middle of the trip, I started kind of keying in on it, that I've made excuses for why I can't do things because of my knee. It was about 2 years ago was the last surgery I had. And one of the worst things that could have happened. Stephanie, my wife, she went with me to my last, final doctor's appointment where they were signing off on me, done with all the rehab, all that stuff. And so, she's in the medical field, so she's asking all kinds of questions. And she goes, well, what kind of exercising does he need to do? And he said, he doesn't need to run. And I was like, dude, I want to kiss you on the mouth right now because I hate running, absolutely hate running. Even when I've been in really good shape and ran a lot, never liked it. I don't understand how you like running. If you like running, God bless you. But it's just not fun to run. And so I'm sitting there thinking, yes, he has just validated that I don't have to run. And it was almost like from that point on, I started leaning into that for other things. And towards the very last part of our trip, my wife let me know, she let me know a little bit further in advance, but she was like, we're going to go to Paris towards the last of the trip, and we're going to go spend a day in Versailles. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Versailles, but it's awesome. And we're going to go to the Palace of Versailles and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, cool. And she's like, we're going to do a bike tour of Versailles. And I'm like, okay, that ain't so bad, doing a bike tour. So, as the trip, we get closer and closer to that day, I start thinking about it, and I'm like, we're going to be in Paris. Where is Versailles in relationship to Paris? So I look it up, and it's 12 miles away, and I'm like, oh, whoa. We about to bike 12 miles from Paris to Versailles and then bike all day? I was like, my knee is already hurting. So between that time, and I'm admitting she hasn't heard me say any of this, I started dropping little hints that I didn't want to do it. Started dropping little subtle hints that, my knee's hurting today. It was, I wasn't lying, but I just made sure she knew. Knee's hurting today. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do it, right? So we get to that morning. We had to get up really early, and we had to meet our tour guide in the middle of Paris. And we're sitting there, and Stephanie, she gives me an out. She basically gives me out. She goes, look, she's like, I don't want this to be miserable for you. If you don't want to do this, we don't have to do this. And at first, I'm like, yes, I don't want to do this. And then, I started thinking about it. I was like, she's going to be so disappointed if we don't do this. And I was like, no, we're good. Let's do it. So we did it. And don't do it, girl. Don't do it. I did it. I did it. And when I tell you, one of the top 10 best days of my life. Hands down. Some of the most fun I've ever had. Was I sore the next day? Absolutely. The knee was hurting the next day. But it was top 10, one of the best days of my life. Now, just for reference, put my Apple Watch stuff up on the screen. I'm going to show you how. All right, look at this. You see how many calories it says I burnt? My goal was 940. I did 2407. Exercise for 175 minutes because my heart was beating out my chest most of the day. Stood for 16 hours, 23,000 steps. That's me not on the bike. That's in conjunction with the bicycle. And I walked 11.8 miles. That doesn't include probably the 12 to 15 miles we biked. But you know what? It was worth it. It was worth every bit of it. I was hurting the next day. I popped a few ibuprofen. I was good to go. But I started thinking about it. Later on that night, we get back to our room in Paris, and I'm laying down on top of the sheets because they don't believe in AC in European countries. They're psychopaths. I'm just laying there. It's like 95 degrees outside, and I sweat at 72, just so you know. I'm laying on top of this bed, and I'm telling you, like, when I got up the next morning, there was an outline that you could see of sweat. It was disgusting. I'm laying there with hardly any clothes on. I'll just be honest, I was naked. I was laying on top of the bed. I can't lie to you. I am dying, right? I'm laying there, and Stephanie's asleep. I don't know how she went to sleep. I told her, don't touch me. It's too hot. I'm laying there, and it's probably about 2 o'clock in the morning. I still can't sleep, and I start thinking about it, and something kind of comes over me, and it's like, you almost missed it. You almost missed today because of a stupid excuse. Almost missed today because of a stupid excuse. And I started thinking about, you kind of start backtracking and be like, I wonder how many things I have missed because of a dumb excuse. How many wonderful days, wonderful times and experiences I've missed because of a stupid excuse. How many times have you missed because you got out of some plans, right? Let's be honest. There's not much better than canceled plans, right? Doesn't it feel kind of good when plans get canceled? Especially if it's something you really weren't into. Somebody calls and they're like, hey man, I'm not going to be able to go out to eat tonight. We're supposed to go to a movie, but I can't go. And you're like, oh man, I hate that. And you hang up the phone, you're about speaking tongues, you're so excited. You're like, man, I'm so glad I don't have to go out to dinner and a movie. I can just stay home and have dinner and a movie. You know, it's great. But that's the way it is sometimes. We make our excuses, and I wonder sometimes how much I've missed, how much of God's blessings I've missed in my life because excuses I've made, right? So why are we really talking about this in church, right? There's a relationship between your ability to follow Jesus and your willingness to push through your fake walls. Now, my fake wall here, right, is paper thin. My excuse for my knee holding me back, originally, there was some merit to it. There was some merit to, why I was not able to do a lot of stuff. But as time went on and my knee got stronger again, I still just kept using that excuse. And an excuse can become a king in your life. It can become a king in your life. And if you're not careful as a Christian, instead of worshiping King Jesus, you start worshiping King Excuse. You're constantly making excuses for why you can't do certain things. Do you want excuses to be your boss? Do you want excuses to run your life? I know I don't. And I'm gonna do my best. I know I'm not gonna be able to go through the rest of my life and not make excuses because that's just who we are. But I'm gonna do my best to try to look myself in the mirror and know when I'm actually making excuses. So we're gonna read a scripture out of Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. And nobody really knows who wrote Hebrews. We're not really 100% sure, but we do know the context of the passage. So the author is writing to a group of readers, a group of people that are going through a really difficult time. They're going through a really difficult time, and he's trying to encourage the people to not give up on their faith in Jesus, not make an excuse to give up on their faith in Jesus just because they're going through a difficult time. And this is how it starts. Let us throw off everything that hinders. So, in layman's terms, let's get rid of our excuses. Let us throw off our excuses that we make. Let us throw off all the excuses, the becauses, and not just saying, the reason I can't do that is because let's throw them off, right? And the sin that so easily entangles. So let's throw off our excuses and let's work through our sin. Let's go through the things that we struggle with that separates us from God. And if you want to get down to the most simple of terms, sin is basically just something that hurts somebody. If it hurts somebody, it's most likely a sin. So like, if you lie to somebody, that's a sin, right? You can't have a good relationship with somebody if you're lying to somebody. That breaks a relationship. That hurts another person. It hurts you. So that's a sin. And if that's the case, an excuse is a lie we tell ourselves about ourselves, right? So we're lying to ourselves. So just connect the dots here. If you're making excuses and you're lying to yourself, you're sinning. We all do it, right? We lie to ourselves. We're sinning against ourselves. We don't even realize it. We're using our excuses as something to hold us back. Throw off everything that hinders you and the sin that so easily entangles you. And this is my favorite part. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Now, right here, if you're not a Christian, you can kind of check out right here a little bit, I guess. Everything I've said, if you're not a believer, you can still agree with what I'm saying about making excuses. But as a Christian, we tend to believe that God's will is the race we're trying to run in our life. Right. We're trying to run this race, and we're trying to run this path that God has set out for us. And if we're constantly making excuses, if we're constantly coming up with reasons not to do stuff, we are taking all kinds of side roads, going down the wrong paths. And in my life, I can look back and think about all the excuses I made for reasons why I didn't want to do something, especially even in the church. It's really difficult to digest this next statement, but people who make excuses rarely make much of a difference. People who make excuses rarely make much of a difference. And I want to make a difference. I hope you want to make a difference. So over the past couple weeks, we've talked a lot about small groups, right? I'm just going to use this as an example. It's random, doesn't connect to anything. But whenever we started talking about small groups, I'd be willing to bet there's a lot of people in the room that you thought to yourself, you're like, maybe that's where I'm supposed to get connected. Maybe I haven't quite found my niche at Cross Point. I love the church, but I haven't found my thing yet. And we started talking about small group hosts, and you're like, maybe that's it. And you kind of felt something, and then you were like, no, I can't do that because it's on Tuesday night. Tuesday night, I go to the gym on Tuesday night, and it's leg day, and I'm trying to make gains, Tuesday, I can't give up leg day. But you could just reschedule stuff. And I wonder if people in the room, not just that, but other things maybe at the church, like maybe somebody's approached you and they're like, hey, you know what? I think that you would do really well working in youth ministry. Like, I've known you for a long time. I know your story. I know some of the stuff you struggle with as a teenager, and you're doing great now. Maybe you could be an influence on some of these teenagers and help them to, get on the right path. You're like, yeah, you know what? That might be a good idea. But I don't think I can because, I usually take an extra shift at work on Wednesdays, or I just can't because, I just got a new car and I'm trying to keep the miles down on the car. Some just stupid excuses, We all do it. Everybody makes up the dumbest excuses. And I, for one, I don't want to constantly make excuses and miss out on blessings that God has for me. Right, yeah. I've thought back, I'm laying in that bed in Paris, sweating to death, and I'm like, I start thinking about all the stuff that I've probably missed out on, and then it starts rolling through my head. I'm like, well, I wonder other things besides just my knee, like other things in life I've made excuses for. Making excuses, I think I'm a champ at it. I'm really good at it, and I decided to do my best to kind of get away from that. Even to this past week, as I'm getting ready for this message after Tuesday when I was told I was speaking, I was listening to a podcast on, it had something to do with excuses. They were talking about it, and I was like, I'm going to listen to that, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to walk. I'm going to walk around. I'm just going to walk the entire time. Try to get my steps in. I was like, I got 23,000 in one day. Maybe I can get like 12 to 13 on average. So I go outside and I start walking, and I'm listening to this podcast about making excuses, and it starts raining. And I was like, well, I'm going in. No lie, y'all. I walk by my truck, and I see in the window an umbrella. It was sitting on the back of the seat, and I'm like, dadgummit, man. I go in there, I grab the umbrella, and I'm walking around. I was walking around the church. I think I walked this whole property like 7 times around, and I'm sitting there. I'm in the middle of studying about not making excuses, and I'm making excuses. It's so easy to make excuses and hold our own selves back. I don't want to do that no more. Eventually, if you want to follow Jesus, you'll have to stop making excuses because you'll have to stop lying to yourself. You'll have to stop lying. Let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus. So we're called to get rid of our excuses, work through our sins, run the race with perseverance, try to live out God's will for our life while the whole time doing our best to constantly keep our focus on Jesus. I think it's time, for me especially, and I think for a lot of you in the room, to shut down the excuse machine. It's time to shut it down. Obviously, there's going to be some real reasons along the way why you can't do things or why you do certain things. But more often than not, we're just making up sorry excuses. We're holding ourselves back, and we are sinning against ourselves without even realizing it. We're sinning by lying to ourselves. Most of us we don't think that way. We don't think that we can actually sin against ourselves, but that's probably who we sin against the most is just ourselves. So today, I want you to, if you don't get nothing else out of anything I've said today, I want you to quit making excuses. Do your best to identify when you're making excuses. So easy to see it in everybody else, right? Start looking in the mirror. Whenever you decide not to do something that you had plans to do and you got out of it, think to yourself, did I just make an excuse? Was it legitimate? I got people in my own family, and they're not this family. Like, well, y'all make excuses too. Whatever. We have somebody in our family that my wife, she's all about making plans. She loves family time, stuff like that, and she's a planner. And we have a particular member of our family that whenever we make plans, it's become a running joke. We'll say after the plans are made and they know about the plans, we're like, all right, how long till they cancel? How long till they say they can't come? Wonder what their excuse is going to be this time. We've actually taken bets. We have sat there and we've tried to come up with what excuse they were going to use, and we've been right a few times. Like clockwork. So easy to see it in other people, but it's so difficult to see in ourselves. Are you going to keep letting excuses be your boss and the king of your life? I hope not. Would you stand with me? Would you bow your heads and close your eyes? It can be extremely difficult, like I said, to see these things in our own life. And for me, honestly, to stand up here and basically tell you that I've been using excuses for my knee and different things like that, like it's kind of difficult thing to admit to people. And it's not that I'm not like a lazy person or anything like that, but sometimes you just want to get out of things because it would be easier. I wonder if in your life, spiritually, like relationally, professionally, if you've made excuses that have held you back. Maybe you're not where you need to be in your relationship with God because you haven't fully given yourself to His plan for your life. Maybe you've made excuses for whenever you felt that you were supposed to get involved with something, or you made excuses to, pull back and not get involved, and you're like, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I can't because. Let's drop the becauses. If you feel like you're supposed to do something in this church, a ministry in general, if you feel like you're supposed to lead a small group, we're going to launch small groups again in like 6 to 8 weeks. We're going to have a whole new set. So if you're feeling it and you're like, I've missed my opportunity, we're going to come back around to you and give you another opportunity. Not just even in our spiritual lives, but a lot of you have been told lies that there are certain things you can't do in your professional life. Maybe you're getting a little bit older and you've always wanted to go back to school. It can be something as simple as that. You wanted to go back to school, but you can't. You can't, right? Because you're too old. It don't make no sense to go back to school. Go back to school if it's something you want to do. Quit making excuses. Do the things that God has for your life. That may be an area of your life that God is going to use for His glory to bring other people to Christ. You never know how God works His plan. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for today. God, I pray, Lord, if nothing else is taken from this, that we can all learn to look in the mirror and filter through the excuses that we constantly make. Help us to identify the things in our life that are holding us back. Help us to do our best to not continue sinning against ourselves, lying to ourselves. God, because you have a race and a path marked out for us. Help us to live it. Help us to work that plan, and help us to find your will for our life, and do it without making excuses. In Jesus' name we pray.